If I think that you should die, you will die.
I'd be happy to slaughter him.
Until the last pusher and the last drug lord are... I will never allow any military man or police to go to jail unjustly for performing his duties.
Rodrigo Duterte, the 16th Philippine president, is turning 77 today. It's his last birthday while in office. Nicknamed Digong, he was born in 1945 into a family closely tied to local politics. His father was once a provincial governor, while his mother worked as a public school teacher. The younger Duterte trained as a lawyer and rose to become a state prosecutor. He entered politics when he was appointed officer-in-charge vice mayor of Davao City by President Corazon Aquino after the 1986 People Power Revolution that toppled the Marcos dictatorship. Since then, he ran as mayor of Davao, for which he was elected for almost 2 decades. Under his mayoral stint, he gained a reputation for making Davao City one of the safest in the Philippines by fighting criminality and corruption. In 2015, he was prodded by his supporters to pursue the presidency. When he accepted the challenge and embarked on a presidential campaign, he made headlines over some of his remarks, including his promise of killing criminals and eradicating the illegal drug trade in 3 to 6 months.
I will get rid of drugs, suppress crime, stop corruption in government in a matter of 3 to 6 months.
He even said in a televised debate that he would kill his own children if they took drugs.
Kaaway mong illegal na droga, anong gagawin nyo sakaling malaman po ninyo na isa sa mga anak nyo ay gumagamit ng illegal na droga?
Patayin mo.
May anak po ba kayong nalulong o gumamit ng illegal na droga?
Everything is okay. Everybody is okay, sir. My order is, even if it is a member of my family, kill him. Kill him.
Despite criticism, he became more popular. He successfully painted a strongman image, a candidate who will do what is necessary to get things done. He slammed the erosion of faith and trust in government and rode on a populist wave by promising real change and transparency to the country of more than 110 million people. And his promise of replicating Davao City's anti-crime efforts on a national level catapulted him to the presidency. On May 30, 2016, the 16th Congress of the Philippines proclaimed Duterte as president-elect after topping the official count with over 16.6 million votes, 6.6 million more than his closest rival, Mar Rojas. He assumed office on June 30, 2016. At the age of 71, he was the oldest Filipino and first Mindanaoan ever elected to the presidency and the first local chief executive to get elected straight to the office of the president.
Rodrigo Roa Duterte,
do solemnly
swear, no leader, however strong, can succeed at anything of national importance or significance unless he has the support and cooperation of the people he is tasked to lead and sworn to serve.
Love him or hate him, but he will likely be remembered for his tough on-crime agenda and drug war, ambitious infrastructure program, pandemic response, and his no-nonsense, colorful language that amused his supporters and enraged his critics.
To keep our essential health services and our food supply chain running, boosting the economy, activity, and ensure peace and order in our communities.
While seeking to eradicate criminality, Duterte accelerated the government's annual infrastructure expenditure through his Build, Build, Build program, which was heavily financed by borrowings. The program aims to usher in the golden age of infrastructure in the Philippines, anchored on the belief that investments on infrastructure are needed to bolster economic development. It also aims to reduce poverty, encourage economic growth, and reduce congestion in Metro Manila. At the start of his term, he identified 119 flagship projects under the Build, Build, Build program, but 6 years later, he only completed 18 projects on the list. The completed projects include the Sangley Point International Airport, as well as the airports in Clark, General Santos, and the new Clark City. He also completed the road network that cuts travel time from Bonifacio Global City to Ortigas from 40 minutes to just 12. On the other hand, among the unfinished projects include a 4-kilometer bridge that will supposedly connect the tropical Samal Island to his hometown Davao City. The pandemic was to blame for the setback, as the delivery of the machines needed for the projects had been hampered by border restrictions. But on the brighter side, the president's 18 legacy projects that had been completed did not yet include some 30,000 kilometers of roads and 6,000 bridges that were either built or rehabilitated under his administration. Nearly 6 years after he assumed the presidency, the government built the NLEX Harbor Link segment, Cavite-Laguna Expressway, Tarlac-Pangasinan-La Union Expressway, Taytay El Nido Road in Palawan, among others. Across the archipelago, about 11,400 flood control projects, 230 evacuation centers, and hundreds of COVID-19 facilities were also built under the Duterte administration. Seaports are also upgraded and rehabilitated, while more than 450 commercial and tourism seaport projects have been completed. He also launched the country's first land port, now known as the Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange, or the PITX. To his credit, the projects made provinces and cities more connected, and the delivery of goods and services are faster and more convenient. Infrastructure spending only comprised 3% of the country's gross domestic product when his term started. To his credit, Duterte raised it to 5.3% of the nation's GDP in 2021 and to an expected 5.8% of GDP by the end of 2022. Before the coronavirus pandemic struck the Philippines, the nation's economy was doing well. GDP averaged 6.5% from the time President Duterte came into office. The unemployment rate continued its long-run decline. The poverty rate also remarkably went down from 2015 to 2018. Observers say this could be attributed to Duterte's, of course, increased infrastructure spending, as well as progressive measures that spurred economic growth. Under his term, the Congress, dominated by his allies, approved key measures such as the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion Law, Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, Ease of Doing Business and Efficient Government Service Delivery Act, Foreign Investment Act, Price Tarification Law. The reforms he and his economic managers had introduced were seen as crucial in attracting investors whose businesses are expected to generate more jobs for Filipino families. To aid the poor, Duterte also championed social policy reforms. Under his administration, the Universal Healthcare Act, Free Quality Tertiary Education Act, Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program Law, Free Irrigation Law, and Free Wi-Fi Access in Public Spaces Act have been approved. Halfway into Duterte's presidency in 2019, the Philippines was one of the fastest growing economies in the world. The Philippines was touted as the next Asian tiger economy, finally shedding its sick man of Asia reputation obtained during the economic collapse towards the end of the Ferdinand Marcos regime in the mid-1980s. But the pandemic upended all of Duterte's gains. The first COVID-19 case was detected in the country in early 2020. Last year, at a time when COVID-19 vaccines were gaining ground, the Philippines appeared to be on the right track in terms of economic rebound. The Philippines in 2021 posted a 5.6% growth, exceeding the government's target of 5%. President Duterte is hoping that as more Filipinos receive anti-coronavirus shots and with a further reopening of the economy, recovery is in sight.
Mamili kayo. Magpabakuna kayo o ipakulong ko kayo sa silda.
Of all the issues he had faced, the greatest challenge he may have confronted as Philippine president is an invisible enemy, the coronavirus disease. It proved to be a serious dilemma on balancing health and economic concerns, for the government had to decide whether a logical choice is to reopen the economy or close it to prevent spread of infection. It also magnified the country's ill-equipped medical health services, particularly challenged by lack of manpower who could accommodate patients during infection surges. Now around 67 million Filipinos have been fully vaccinated, still 3 million short from the government's target of 70 million by the end of the month, but still far from the 90 million goal by June. At present, the government is intensifying its efforts to meet its vaccination targets and protect more people from severe COVID-19 infection.
I appeal to all our kababayans to cooperate and do their part to help overcome this pandemic. The government cannot do this alone, and we need your active participation by getting vaccinated and strictly following the minimum health standards.
Even before the pandemic hit the country, Duterte is no stranger to natural calamities or man-made disasters, albeit on a smaller scale. On top of typhoons, the commander-in-chief in 2017 dealt with the 5-month-long armed conflict in Marawi City in Lanao del Sur, now considered the longest urban battle in the modern history of the country. Maute Group, an extremist alliance allied with ISIS, launched a takeover of Marawi in May 2017, taking government troops by surprise. The Philippine military waged ground assaults and airstrikes to defeat them, leaving a trail of destruction in the city, known for its rich cultural and architectural heritage. The government made significant progress in the rehabilitation of Marawi, though many residents are still grappling with poverty. A lawyer, former prosecutor, and longtime mayor, Duterte built an entire election campaign on an anti-crime agenda. Since Duterte assumed office in 2016, authorities conducted over 226,000 anti-narcotics operations, seized an estimated 75.35 billion peso worth of illegal drugs, arrested 14,000 high-profile targets, and dismantled about 1,026 dens and clandestine laboratories based on government data. At least 6,000 suspected drug peddlers have been killed by the police in what they called legitimate sting operations after suspects purportedly resisted arrest. Despite international pressure, Duterte continued with his crusade against illegal drugs. He even increased the salaries of soldiers and policemen and appointed them in civilian posts. He also signed into law the landmark Bangsamoro Organic Law, the culmination of the peace deal signed between the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and Duterte's predecessors, which was perceived to pave the way for lasting peace in Mindanao. To fight corruption, Duterte also formed the Presidential Anti-Corruption Commission and created task forces to probe agencies, particularly the Bureau of Customs and the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation. In various instances, however, he admitted fatigue as illegal drugs, communist insurgency, and corruption in the government remained.
Maituturing na isang matagumpay at produktibo ang 5-day official visit ni Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte sa China. Isa sa pinaka-naging sentro dito ay ang bilateral meeting nila ni Chinese President Xi Jinping.
Also among the issues that hounded the Duterte administration include his handling of the West Philippine Sea issue. In the past 6 years, China retained its aggressive posture in the highly contested waters, having various incursions into Philippine territory that prompted the government to fire off diplomatic protests. Duterte tiptoed in the issue as he repeatedly said that the country could not risk having trouble with China. Instead, he sought cordial ties with Beijing for foreign investments and loans. His moves were anchored on his independent foreign policy, the belief that the nation should be a friend to all and enemy to none. Duterte will go down in history as the most popular post-Marcos president. Compared to his three predecessors, the first Mindanaoan chief executive has kept his approval ratings above 70% based on Pulse Asia surveys, and his net satisfaction ratings not lower than positive 45, which counts as good. He is leaving Malacanang with a towering feeling.
Ang tatay ko, ginawang ligtas, panatag at maayos ang buong bayan.
Wala yan sa tatay ko. Ibinalik ang ganda ng Boracay.
Mas magaling yung tatay ko. Nakamit niya ang kapayapaan sa Mindanao.
Ang tatay ko sinagot ang ospital at pagpagamot ko.
Sino yung tatay ko?
Ang tatay ko.
Tatay ko.
Ang tatay ko,
Si Tatay Digong.
Si Tatay Digong.
Si Tatay Digong.
si tatay Digong,
Siya ang tatay ko.
Taas noo nating pagmalaki, tayo ay Pilipino.
I love the Philippines. It is the land of my birth. It is the home of my people. I'm no bigot, but I've always been a hardliner against crime. My character is my identity in this planet.
The Philippines is home to more than 100 million people spread across 7,000 islands. Corruption and political dynasties have made this staunchly Catholic Southeast Asian country a divided land of powerful elites and the poor. How did a tough-talking mayor, widely viewed as a political outsider, end up as the country's president?
The problems that bedevil our country today are corruption, criminality, and the rampant sale of illegal drugs in all strata of Philippine society.
Mayor Rodrigo Duterte is a self-styled straight-talking cowboy from the restive South.
Before running for national office, for 22 years, Duterte served as the mayor of Davao, a southern port city racked with violence, once known as the murder capital of the Philippines.
And when I became mayor, I said, no progress or development can ever occur in the city if there is no law and order.
Investigations by human rights groups revealed that vigilante death squads killed hundreds of people. In 2009, Human Rights Watch found evidence of direct involvement of government officials in extrajudicial killings in Davao.
I do not need to set up this squad. It's the job of every policeman or every citizen in the city to make the arrest.
As mayor, Duterte cemented his reputation as an iron-fisted, anti-drug crusader. And with that on his record, he set out to sell Davao as a success story to voters across the nation in the 2016 presidential election.
I will solve drug criminality, pati corruption sa gobyerno. Binibigyan ko lang ang sarili ko 3 to 6 months.
Presidential campaigns often tend to be more about personalities than policies, and pollsters say that's especially true in the Philippines.
Some of his opponents had fame, others had ties to political families. All had a track record on the national stage.
I love you too.
Fundamentally, the Philippines is feudal. The politicians have it instead of the kings or the lords. Politicians win elections because they have the money.
In contrast, Duterte positioned himself as an outsider who wanted to create economic equality. During his campaign, he promised no-nonsense governance.
Corruption has been there. It is not making my country more peaceful, it's more violent. Nobody believes me when I say that corruption has to stop.
Despite these grand ambitions, the self-styled candidate stirred up controversy wherever he went.
You must be ready to embrace the germs and the sentiments and the sadness of the people.
In this conservative Catholic nation, the twice-married man had a reputation for womanizing.
I do not pull women to my face and view them. It's the women who go near and with the pouted lips, which means really to the man,
But scandals and controversies did not hold the 71-year-old back. On election day, Rodrigo Duterte won the presidency by a clear margin.
They say that my methods are unorthodox and verge on the illegal. The fight will be relentless and it will be sustained.
Soon after the elections, Duterte amped up his war on drugs.
We will eliminate the drug lords once and for all.
In the next episode, we examine Duterte's brutal war on drugs as he showed on a national stage why he was called the Punisher.
How do you deal with 4 million addicts? It has to stop. You cannot compromise with criminals. I am the only remaining card left for the Filipinos to deal with the situation. I'm the only candidate who would say, stop it, I'll kill you.
In his first year as president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte shook up law and order. The populist strongman declared a brutal war on drug dealers and addicts.
One shot in the head would do it. Do not sometimes they pump several bullets, and that's crazy. If you feel that you are in danger of losing your life, shoot. And that would be the order that I would give to all military and policemen. If you kill somebody, you tell him that is the order of Duterte.
In slums across the Philippines, those orders were carried out. During the first 6 months of his presidency, an average of 34 people a day were killed in drug operations.
Many here in the Philippines describe this death as collateral damage in a much-needed war on drugs. Others say they are violations of human rights that need to be investigated.
In the capital, Manila, Jerome was one of the casualties.
He's been in drugs, but he tried to change because he has a little girl, but then he ended up like being a stray dog by a car, no pavement, and dead.
The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God.
John Paul Magno says his 32-year-old brother Jerome was shot dead on the street by police.
When I see his tattoo and recognized it, that I realized it was really him. And came here, but the police told me don't touch the body.
He says his community is afraid.
You just don't kill people like that. That's not fair. We grew up in this place, and we know everyone here who live in this place. But now, it seems like everyone is a stranger.
2 years into his presidency, human rights groups estimated 27,000 people had been killed in the war on drugs. Despite a wave of condemnation, President Duterte remained unapologetic.
When I say, do not do drugs because I will kill you, I will kill you. What is now wrong with threatening criminals?
The nation's jails also felt the impact of the drug war, pushing an already crowded prison system to the brink.
According to United Nations standards, this prison is designed to hold no more than 270 inmates. Right now, there are 3,500. It's become so overcrowded, the prison is now turning people away.
When we met Bengoy, he had been in jail for 2.5 months.
Drugs. Pinagbintangan nila ako nagtutulak. Pero kahit pera at saka droga, wala sila nakuha sa akin. Hindi ko tinatangging gumagamit ako, pero hindi ako nagtutulak.
Bengoy claims 8 police officers wrongfully arrested him in a convenience store.
May hiningi sila sa akin tao, hindi ko maibigay dahil hindi ko naman kilala. Nung tinutukan akong baril sa ulo, sabi sa akin, Bengoy, kilala ka namin, sumama ka na lang na maayos. Tinira nila buhay ko.
Violence and conflict would come to define Duterte's presidency. The Punisher would soon be fighting wars on multiple fronts, with growing unrest in the country's south and the rise of China in the region.
Hindi biro ang mga pagsubok na hinarap at patuloy na kinakaharap ng ating Pangulo. Pero dahil sa tapang at malasakit sa mga Pilipino ni Pangulong Duterte, unti-unti nating nakamit ang mga pagbabago. Mula noong 2016, marami na ang nagbago sa ating bayan. Mga pagbabagong nakikita, nararamdaman at napapakinabangan ng Pilipino. Ito ang pamana ng pagbabago. Pangako ni Pangulong Duterte ang komportableng buhay para sa mga Pilipino. Kaya tuloy-tuloy ang mga pamana ng pagbabago. Build, build, build projects, rehabilitasyon ng MRT3 at iba pang mga bagong trend.
These are a testament that we have greatly eased the grueling experience of traveling and commuting.
Skyway Stage 3 at mga proyekto magpapaluwag ng EDSA. Central Luzon Link Expressway, Cebu-Cordova Link Expressway at mga bagong expressway at highway. Bagong terminal building ng Clark International Airport at iba pang airport projects. Mahigit 29,000 kilometro na kalsada, mahigit 400 seaport projects, mga bagong tulay, rehabilitasyon ng naiya at wala ng laglag bala, at mahigit 6 na milyong trabaho mula noong 2016. Ito ang Duterte Legacy.
Kumbaga, tanggap naman ng family namin. Ganito yung nature ng work namin.
Matutulog ka na, basa ang iyong buhok. At gigising ka, basa pa rin yung buhok mo. Dahil ganun po yung hirap po namin dito.
When you're there in the field, when you're there in the flight, and then you hear them clap. The moment na nag-touchdown yung eroplano, pag nakita mo silang naluluha, pero nakasmile.
Kung ako lang ang superhero, sana lahat sila nakuha ko nung araw na magre-retrieve kami.
Ano man ang mga pagsubok, matindi man ang ating dagok, sisikat ang araw sa bagong umaga, may bagong pag-asa ang bawat isa.
As a nurse po na nag-work sa COVID facility,
ako ay nag-positive dahil nga po hindi natin nakikita ang kalaban sa
hirap sa buhay o kaya'y napilay, hindi yan hadlang para makabangon.
Ang nakakalungkot lang sir, hindi mo makakasama yung family mo.
Kaya ako, kung ano man yung pwede kong maitulong sa kanila, kung mapapauwi para ma-reunite sila.
Masaya po kami kasi makikita na po naman ang aming pamilya.
Maganda kasi marami ka napupuntahan. Because kung marami ka napupuntahan, marami kang assignment, marami ka ring natutulungan.
Pero sa kabila ng kanilang mga pagsubok na kinakaharap, nanatili pa ring matatag, magaling at matibay ang mga Bicolano. Totoo sa kasabihan, basta't Bicolano, Oragon. Diyos mabalos.
Habang may pag-asa, di mawawala ang diwa, kandilang walang hanggan na apoy. Ito ang totoong puso ng Pinoy. Ibabaw ang bayanihan, lumalaban ka para sa bayan. Inuuna mo ang iyong kapwa, tumutulong ka kahit kapos ka na. Isang pamilya, isang bansa, nagdadamayan, nagkakaisa, laging handa at sama-sama, di sumusuko sa anumang problema.
Ang serbisyo ay dapat matibay, malakas.
Dahil ang inisip ko, sir, serbisyo to sa bayan. Kasi kung hindi ako, sir, sino, sir, ang gagawa?
Ang dami po, pero unti-unti pong nababawasan, nasasala. So, iilan na lang po yung talagang merong dedikasyon na magtrabaho para sa bayan.
Maraming salamat po, Pangulong Duterte, sa inyong tulong sa amin.
Walang hanggan na apoy, ito ang totoong puso ng Pinoy. Sama-sama, pag-asa, sama-sama, ating isip ay malaya. Kahit sa pinakamadayong na araw, mabangon tayo, huwag kang bumitaw. Sama-sama, pag-asa, sama-sama, ating isip ay malaya. Kahit sa pinakamadayong na araw, mabangon tayo, huwag kang bumitaw. Sama-sama, tayo ay magsama-sama, sama-sama, tayo ay magsama-sama, sama-sama, tayo ay magsama-sama. Ito ang totoong puso ng Pinoy.
We will get through this crisis, I assure you. As one nation, kapit po tayo, mga kababayan, magbayanihan po tayong lahat.